Welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. This is Friday, February 3rd, and we're going to continue with BGS. And I don't know if folks saw us, but we were on the news last night.
Yes.
The whole committee.
Yep.
I didn't see it with this in.
It was about the replacement of the Calvin Conrad.
Me. Too close.
Everyone was on but
He was
you.
too close. He's sitting on my shoulder. I'm like, hey, you can't get me on the camera with that thing.
Well, they focused on Eric, and then they focused on you.
That's right.
Michelle.
I'm getting a haircut this weekend.
They got the back of your head.
Oh,
They got the back of your
You see
head.
it?
Awful.
Yeah, I happen to be sitting there. Oh, look.
It was on CAX. It's gonna be, people back home will say, what's that on TV? Oh, yeah. What'd I say? I don't know.
Doesn't say anything.
No, I get the same thing.
So, anyway, so Calvin was in here yesterday. Anyway, but we're on YouTube, so we go all over.
Right.
So we have a few more items. We're in the BGS section. We're on section 2. On our spreadsheet, we are going to be starting with line 29. And we're gonna finish those, oh, there's nothing on, yeah, there is something on line 29, all the way out. No, there is nothing on line 29. Sorry. That's the 110 elevator.
Right.
We're gonna start on line 30. And this is going to be an FY 2025. So we have the commissioner of BGS with her, I'll call you the Three Stooges.
Which one do I get?
You're the commissioner, you can choose.
Mo, Curly, and
Larry.
Larry.
Larry?
Pull my hair out, Mo.
It could be Shem. He was a later model.
The three of you. I mean, you just go wherever, all three of
We
you.
are a 3-pack, that is.
Oh, God. So I'm gonna turn,
Shakur.
so I'm gonna turn it over to the commissioner.
Thank you,
It's all
Madam
yours.
Chair. My name is Jennifer Fitch, and I am the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services, and you have mentioned the other two. My colleagues are here today. Can you introduce yourselves?
Good morning, Joe Angier, the County Construction Director, BGS.
Larry. Larry.
I'm Eric Kilcorn, Principal Assistant.
You know it's been a long week when we get there.
It really is.
Friday.
Yeah.
Must be Friday.
Oh.
And everyone knows today is the last day of my cleanse for the month of January, so I am very excited. After work today, I'm going to have a beverage.
Ah,
Looking
yes.
forward to it.
What kind of beverage?
I'm gonna have a beer, Madam Chair.
There you go.
I hope
Off
so.
work hours, of course.
What's your preferred kind of beer? For the
Ooh, I like Allagash White, it's probably one of my.
Oh, yeah.
favorites.
Right.
Is
that for the notes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
no, but I would like what you said transcribed.
Oh, God. Thank God it's Friday.
Um,
It's like we've been here a month.
It certainly does. And I also wanted to double back with the committee. They had a question about which operations and maintenance employee brought R22 to our attention. We did verify that it was Wade Franklin. I will be sending him I already sent a very nice note to his manager, but I will be sending him a nice note personally as well. If anybody else wants to send him a nice note, just let me know. I'm happy to provide his email address. He's great.
Why don't you just say thank you from the House Corrections?
When I write my note,
And
I'm sure,
approach, I think
happy to do that.
approach would appreciate it.
Happy to.
If the committee's fine with that. Yeah.
Wade Franklin has also volunteered to be one of our first asset taggers. So we've talked about WIMS, hopefully at some point I'll have a chance to come in and talk about that implementation, but all you need to know right now is that we're gonna go through and tag all of our assets for all of our buildings. It's a huge undertaking, and Wade and another employee have volunteered to do a test pilot program. And then they will then train other people in operations and maintenance how to do that. So Wade is an amazing employee.
We were doing that back in the 2000s.
No, not at BGS. Not at BGS.
We did.
Well, then A&R is ahead of us.
They're numbering for
All right.
computers and stuff, but we're talking about like down to the boilers and air handlers and a QR code on everything. So you walk up with your iPhone, it tells you what it is, when to change the filter, how old it is, how it's behaving.
go in more detail on
Can we microchip you, Eric?
that. He is an
already
asset,
have.
so I think we should.
Also a liability though.
But I will do that, Madam Chair. When I write my note, I'll
Mhm.
reference this committee as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
So we're gonna start on page 31 in our books. I feel like I'm in church. We're gonna start on page 31 in our books. Everybody, the hymn we're gonna be singing is,
Yeah, the hymnal.
we shall overcome. It's definitely Friday. It's definitely Friday.
Feel it's Friday.
That's right. So this is our proposed request for the 133-109 State Street Tunnel. I believe, but I was not with you, that you walked through the tunnel. Is that correct?
We did, the old committee, not this one, the old
this
committee.
Institutions.
Well, if anybody would ever like a tour of the tunnel, we're happy to provide a tour.
Yeah, I've never been through. I'd like
It's
to.
fun.
The tunnel goes from 133 State Street to the pavilion, underground.
And I hear,
Just one.
That's one, that's.
That is the one.
That's,
No,
I hear stories of, at one point in time, that tunnel was open on at least one end and people like to go and skateboard through it. Back in the day, I don't know when that was. Ever since I've been here, it's been closed.
pre-card access.
Free card access.
Clay wheels.
card
Not
access,
that bad.
card access really started after 9/11
That is correct.
in the gate to the parking lots.
Yep.
That was after 9/11.
But it is quite fun. If you're on a skateboard, there's nice pitches and curves that you go around, so it's fun. If you do,
Wet.
and Phil, phenomenal again, Steve and I are just jiving together. So that's a nice picture, and as Madam Chair indicated, and you can see it in the winter when the snow starts to melt. It basically goes from here, kind of takes a little bit of an angle, and then goes into the basement of 111 and 109. There's access to the Supreme Court, and if you keep going, there's access to 109. If you look at page 31 in your books, again, you're gonna see some things like efflorescence. That's that white stuff that you can see on the concrete. It's an indication that moisture is coming through the tunnel. And so the goal of this is to waterproof it. And in addition to that, if you've driven up Aiken Avenue, which interestingly enough is actually owned and maintained by BGS, you'll see that there's a lot of cracking in the asphalt. So we know that we need to reconstruct the asphalt there, the pavement, but we didn't want to do that now and then have to rip it up to do this waterproofing and then do it a second time, because that wouldn't be the best use of taxpayer dollars. So this goes first, and then the next step would be to repave Aiken Avenue. Again, we're trying to do that in a really cost-effective manner. So in addition to walking through it, promise to answer that question, it also carries the steam line.
That is correct. And our ADS is fiber. That's our main backbone running through there.
So we do have some infrastructure in the tunnel as well.
So Michelle, you had a question?
So I just was wondering if you could say a little bit more about the purpose of the tunnel. I mean, it's fun, but like,
Super fun.
but is it
We should
really,
take a
is it
ride.
really a safety need? I mean, like, I guess I'm just wondering, like, $1.5 million, what are we getting for that?
So it's a great question. As I indicated, there's infrastructure in that tunnel. And so we need something to continue to house that infrastructure. And in terms of the origin of the tunnel, I have to say, I don't know what the origin of the tunnel was. I will tell you, as somebody that's in 133, or even when I was in Aiken, it was really nice and really cold or yucky days to take the tunnel and stay out of the weather. So that's just me from a personal basis, but I don't know why the tunnel went in.
It was constructed in the late 70s when we were doing the steam loop.
Doing the
during
what,
that
steam
time-
work?
The steam loop.
The steam loop that runs around the whole campus here, that runs from the heat plant. And at that time, they put in a tunnel because they thought it was a great idea to be underground, traveling in the weather and everything else. They did look at doing a tunnel to 120 State Street and also to the State House. But due to the ledge and utilities, it was just cost prohibitive, so they did not do it.
John?
Waterproof from the inside or from the outside?
We were looking at the outside. There's new technology out there that we might consider to do on the inside to see how that works, because then we would have
To
to
do all the excavation.
excavate and uncover.
So you're gonna do it on the inside or the outside?
That
That's
we will
part of the
investigate
planning
that.
and design process.
And that's what some of the, Now-
Outside's better.
the 250 is broken down. This is cash.
Mm-hmm.
It's from the cash fund. in FY '25. So it's broken down 80,000 for planning and then 170 for construction to begin in FY '25. Pointing that out to folks, because we haven't made the policy decision here in terms of what the cash fund will be used for. Will it just be used for programming and design, or are we going to get into site acquisition and construction with it? Putting that on the table for folks to think about.
And as folks are thinking, I know this is not BGS, I just want to mention the flexibility. So it's nice to have flexibility because it allows us to move, there are parameters on it, but it allows us to move money around. So having two distinct accounts with no flexibility between the two of them will be more challenging for BGS over time. So that's just a BGS putting my hat on along with that as well.
Questions, John?
Yeah, what's the area right up in here where there's no snow?
There's another steam tunnel. That's the one that runs from the pavilion, 109 State Street, to the agricultural building, 116 State Street.
But it's a tunnel,
It's not one that you can walk through, just for the steam tunnel.
service tunnel.
Yes. Not when you fit it.
That's great.
Yes.
Tristan?
Is there value to the tunnel as far as providing access to the infrastructure for future maintenance? And can you, so compare that to situations where you don't have that access?
So if the tunnel disappeared, Joe,
Dig up the lawn.
We have replaced the valves in the tunnel both part of the loop and into the state house at least once that I can remember. And that means we can do that. Depends on how it's set up and what time of year it is, during the normal workday or the weekend, and walk in there with their tools. They're supposed to bring in an excavator in and digging it up. They're pulling off that concrete cover that's been in place for 45 years. So plus we have also, ADS has their fiber network running through there. That would not be possible.
And I would mention, this is a great example where having these utility tunnels, but also to your point, being able to be accessible and as a human, being able to access them. So a great example of that is Marble Valley. There is a tunnel that runs maybe actually I think it runs all the way around. But as a cost saving measures, what they did is they shortened the height. So it was originally supposed to be tall enough for a person to walk through it, and they shrunk it down. So I saw that this summer. It's terrible. Now it's confined space. We need to have confined space training. We need to have someone down there what they call the sniffer, making sure that the air quality, and you have to sit, you either have to crawl or sit in this little chair and maneuver yourself around in a chair. So I just want to emphasize that having utility tunnels that are easy for someone to work inside is really critical. We pay a lot more when we have undersized utility tunnels because, again, you need to have someone down there making sure that the air quality is sufficient, all the training. When we bring in a vendor to do work, we pay an increased price for them to work in confined space. So just wanted to mention that in general.
Thank you.
Weren't we a few years ago looking at redoing the whole tunnel?
At Marble Valley?
No, here.
Oh,
Yeah, weren't
we
we?
have talked
We
about,
had talked
we
about
had
that,
talked about doing the tunnel before.
Waterproofing it, yes.
but not redid, because I thought there was
No,
going to be.
years 2012,
I don't remember
2013,
talking
something like that. We did the tunnel between 133 and 6 Baldwin, along that whole parking lot. Because after we redid 133 and took it off steam and put in hot water, we found that we had a lot of water coming into the building and it degraded faster. Our concrete walls, so we did a lot of patching. So that was done roughly in that era for a tunnel work.
Chip?
So if you waterproof it from the outside, what happens to all that funky stuff on the inside?
We fixed the funky stuff.
You do? You
Yes,
like
we do.
scrape
Either
it
way,
down
it
or?
has to be fixed.
Yeah, okay.
So you got 1.25 in the out years. Is the 250 that's being projected for FY '25 possible just to get a little bit of construction started?
That is correct, Madam Chair. If you do look at the photo that's on the screen, you can see all the alligator cracking on 2 Aiken. In the next year or two, instead of sealing just the cracks, we just seal the whole top. Also, there's the sprinkler line going into 2 Aiken. So what we're looking to do is get the work done, put our design in place, be able to do the construction on that, so when 2 Aiken is done, we can reclaim that road and repave it and be all set, and then the rest of it will come in the out year to finish all the way across the lawn.
Troy? Oh, okay. So you're anticipating that the 250 is going to take care of all the waterproofing?
Just from 133 to beyond Aiken Avenue. Just get us onto the lawn of the State House, not the whole lawn. Not the whole tunnel. We're just starting this.
He's
It's sort of like a
phasing it,
two-phase project.
Right.
And you're starting it at 133 and
Yes,
across
so we can
state?
get out of the road, get the road paved before it starts breaking up even worse.
This is AOT type strategy where we fix the culvert before we pave the road.
That's right.
V-Trans do it the other way.
Hey,
I
I
will
worked
speak
there
the
for a long
story.
time. Sorry.
That's the hard question.
Okay, anything else? Just, I thought I saw your finger go up, as long as it's the right finger.
Commissioner, you are, or maybe this is a question for Joe. Do you look at, when you're doing a paving project, do you look at upgrading to permeable paving, or would you look at that in the planning process?
Ooh, I can
I'll
tell
let you
you
take that.
all about permeable paving, and we can talk about that offline.
Didn't we talk about that last year?
I'm certainly
Or was that
aware
the
of
concrete?
some of the, I'm not, I'm certainly aware of the pragmatics of it, Commissioner. I'm curious about your background.
What about the Randolph Park and
I had the Randolph Park and Ride, so I was in research at the time where the Randolph Park and Ride went in, and that was concrete, it wasn't asphalt. Asphalt's trickier because what happens is the binder that you use, which is asphalt, now I'm going way deep in a rabbit hole, but basically it needs to have a low temp and a high temp at which it operates, and that's harder to do when you're doing like a permeable asphalt. It's normally more successful when we talk about permeable concrete, but in the case of the Randolph Park and Ride, which was the first one we did in the state of Vermont, actually wrote a 3-page paper why we shouldn't do it before we did it. But the issue was, again, you have to get that cement paste, which is what binds the aggregate together. And the problem in Randolph is that and it's new, right? So this is what happens. We didn't get the right, so what happened was there wasn't enough coating on the aggregate. With freeze-thaw cycle, it just popped. So within 3 years, it was basically rubble. I have not been back since. My understanding was we were working with EVM to lay in some precast permeable concrete. I don't know if that ever happened though, and I also don't know, because I was gone at that point, if it was successful or not. So in Burlington, they have another, we didn't do it, it was Burlington Waterfront, and they have permeable concrete in the driving areas, and they have regular asphalt pavement where you park. So they were trying to kind of do both at the same time, recognizing that again, it's a tough material to have in a cold weather climate like this, where you've got sand and it fills all the pores. And in Europe, what they do is they actually have these large machines that go and vacuum out the concrete. We don't have that here yet, at least in New England. So there are a lot of challenges. I think there's promise, but I think it needs a lot more exploring before we adopt it.
Brattleboro Food Co-op in Brattleboro is on the second version of their permeable paving parking lot, but they use pavers with a sub base. And it's been holding up for now a couple of winters, I think.
The co-op isn't that old though. It's only 10 years, 12 years.
Right, and the first system was not installed properly and failed. This is the second system, but it seems to be holding up. They're right on, I thought of it because being right on the river.
Yep.
You're looking for these opportunities.
Absolutely, and I would encourage V-Trans because this is really their area of expertise, and we generally follow their specs.
Scott Campbell's up there now. So he can bring that to the committee up there now, because he brought it here.
But really, when it comes to because we have this at the Vermont Agricultural Environmental Lab, it's similar to what you're saying in that it was prefabricated components. It really comes down to how you maintain them as well. So they have to be maintained well.
We did have it at the Public Safety Forensics Lab in Waterbury. And I believe we changed it out the first, maybe the second year. Because of the amount of salt we put down and the machines and the labor we were having to put at it, we did not have the correct vacuum system to go through and vacuum out the hole. And so it was replaced within a year or two of that opening.
So again, I see promise. It's just
It's not there
innovation,
yet.
right?
And does our weather cycles with the hot and the cold?
Freeze thaw is definitely not great. When you talk about
Great on
these different
any.
kinds of materials, it definitely makes it more challenging. Again, to get either the aggregate paste correctly with the cement or get that, that binder that I was talking about with the asphalt. It's tricky.
Thank you.
Anything else on the
Yay,
tunnel?
I'm glad I got to go back to my transportation days. That was fun.
Now that I know you're a civil engineer, Commissioner.
All right.
Oh. Okay, let's move on.
So on page 32, and look, those stand up already. State House replacement of historic interior finishes. So I know David Sheets.
Yep.
If you invite him in, it's just gonna be a rock star on this page. So I'll just do the high level, which is, at one point, there was no appropriation in the capital bill to maintain all of the sort of historic elements and components in the State House. And David absolutely adores and loves, and his passion is the State House. And so unfortunately, what that meant was David couldn't do the great work that David does because he didn't have a funding source. So a few years ago, we added this line item into the capital bill to provide David with specific funding to again do the drapes and the carpets and the other historic details of the State House and maintaining it. So that's what this is for. Again, David will, I don't even want to take away any of his win because he's just going to do an amazing job when he comes in, and you'll see the passion that he brings to this particular line item. But there's other things like the house, I know we talk about the house chamber and the rocky chairs in there that have been there for a very long time, you know,
On lists to the.
it lists and, you know,
Mine fits me
To adjust your
fine.
ballast.
It says mushroom.
so he knows, and that is one of the other things, I mean, all of these things he's looking at, but that is one of the things that's slated on the list, is to go through and refurbish all of those chairs while still maintaining their historic character, hopefully making them less squeaky. So that's the goal.
Well, touring through my first time here with David, he complained that in the 1970s, they redid those chairs with Naga hide. It was really offensive to David. So now they're horsehair and velvet, but they are extremely uncomfortable after a long period of time.
I've looked
So the floor sessions won't be as long, right?
Yeah, well, I doubt that. Can't count on that, Eric.
We've looked at replacing those chairs back,
It's
even in the 90s, we looked at that. Has he finished the work, you may not know this, the interpretive plan that they were working on?
I can give a slight update on that. So David, I'm not sure if he received funding or not. That piece I don't know, but he has been working on the interpretive plan. He did hire a consultant to do the interpretive plan. My understanding is that he has the draft report back. However, he has some concerns over the report, and I believe was still working with the consultant to address those concerns. So there is a draft, but it does not meet David's expectations, is my understanding, and he is continuing to work on that.
So maybe David could give us just an update on what an interpretive plan is, because this semi ties into it a little bit in terms of connecting the pieces with our other historical sites and this and interpretation of the State House and the amenities and everything that's here, the artwork, all of that. It's been a work in progress for about 3 years now. So this is sort of ongoing. A lot of what you see in these pictures up here, a lot of this was been brought up to historical correctness, maybe. It started really back in the 80s. Friends of the State House really took an initiative to bring up our State House to make it more historically correct in terms of fixtures, chandeliers, carpeting, draperies, all of that. Prior to that, it looked pretty 1960s, 1970s, you know, with the radiators and all. It just wasn't. So the Friends of the State House, and then David came on as curator. It really started renovations within the State House, particularly like in the Cedar Creek room, which many people have not been in because it is now temporarily a committee room, but that was the main caucus room. Room 10 was a caucus room.
11, yeah.
The lounge, when we did the addition back in the late 80s and incorporated a lot of the historical integrity of the building, the lounge, which used to be the Supreme Court way back, got opened up. And some of that was used for legislative staff, our legal counsel. And that got opened up for a lounge for legislators to go in, not the public, but just for legislators to get away and do some work. So now we have to take care of our investments. John?
Which of the two cash funds, or is it both that have the restriction for planning only?
Cash fund,
Planning and design.
any interest.
Right.
The other is just general cash that they're proposing to put into the cash.
So the CEC, so 50,000 has got that restriction on it?
50,000 is what we're gonna have to work with in terms of what the policy is if we agree with a cash fund, which has already been established last year in the appropriations
Right.
bill. What we need to really look at what the policy is for the use of that cash fund. The initial intent, what was testified last year and agreed to, and what was testified this year at the beginning of our process of hearing the governor's budget, was the cash fund would be used for planning and design. Not fit up, not site acquisition, not
So
construction.
that 50,000 does have that restriction on it?
That will be a policy decision we're gonna have to talk about. The governor has proposed to use it for fit up. Doesn't mean we agree with that. We'll have to figure that out when we do markup. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
We'll have to have those conversations. And that's why I asked Commissioner Gresham last week when he went through the parameters for the cash fund that was in the language. I asked him to define more what he meant by other capital projects. Because there's an interpretation from one part of the agency of administration, it's pretty broad. There's another interpretation of just all other capital projects.
I guess the question to BGS is that is 50,000 the right number to have there?
So $50,000, I'd have to go back and check. I believe that's
That's what it's been.
normal.
That's what it's been,
Request.
50,000. The question is the source. Is it bonded dollars or is it cash?
But if there's anything left over, it can't be slid over into actually doing the work.
I think if I'm interpreting what you're saying is that if we're doing carpets and drapes, doesn't that fall under construction versus planning and design? And because it's listed as cash, does that mean, or it's under the cash fund, does that mean we could only use it for planning and design? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And unfortunately, the cash fund is not BGS, it's AOA. So I can't respond to those
What do you mean
questions.
by AOA?
The Agency of Administration, Madam Chair, and that would be our Secretary, Kristen Lauser, as well as our COO, Sean Brown, and then it sounds like you've had Adam Gresham in, which is the Commissioner of Finance and Management.
Trying to line both of those up and they didn't line up. We'll go over the language of the cash fund. And there's 4 things. And 3 of those 4 is planning and design. It's a front end part of a project. And then there's D that says all other capital projects from the General Assembly. Well, I tried to get Commissioner Gresham to define that. Didn't get much of a definition. COO Brown says something totally different. So we're just trying to work it through.
Madam Chair, do you remember the logic of putting that restriction on it? I don't.
When that was proposed last session, the cash fund, they wanted those dollars to be used for planning and design, not for actual construction and site work. Because it wasn't gonna be a lot of money. And it was the first attempt to get into a pay-go where you pay as you go along for your projects. So they were saying there's planning and design dollars. There's always a lot of planning, and all these project costs that you see when you start a project like the tunnels, BGS has to do some planning and do some schematic design. So what the administration was proposing last year for the cash fund, the dollars in the cash fund would be used for those planning processes as we start a new project. So what we have to do as our committee, do we do that? Or do we expand the use of that cash fund, which then puts more pressure on that cash fund if you expand the use of it? Because the cash fund is dependent on the general fund. So we're at the mercy of the appropriations committee for part of our capital bill. And do we want to continue doing that or not? That's what we have to discuss. And we may agree on something and that goes over the other body and they may have a whole different view. And appropriations may not, they may say, hey, that's 62 million in cash. You may not have it. You can keep the 18 million in the cash fund, but that's 62 million we need upstairs for something else. Those are conversations that we'll be developing over the month of February and March, at least on this side. And then when it goes over to the Senate, it's going to be another conversation completely. So some of this is out of our hands in a way. Because Transportation Committee also has 68 million of surplus dollars in their budget. So that's going to play in too. Tristan.
I just have a question about how the sort of projects are broken out. This is basically sort of the 50,000 annual project there. I imagine there are major maintenance projects that are at that scale that aren't sort of called out with their own line. So procedural, I think I want to ask. This one is special because of
This one is special.
the David Sheets factor,
That's
the
right.
historical factor.
That's right.
That's what I was gathering, but not that right.
That's right. So David is the expert in this area. There's a lot of demands for for Joe's major maintenance funding with the 200, and I'm gonna get technical, 38 buildings that we have. I usually roll it up to 240. And so there's a lot of competing needs. And if I need a new boiler, let's say, obviously smaller scale because we put the large ones in the capital bill, then that's probably gonna winnow out over carpet in the State House. That's not to say the carpet in the State House is not important. It's just to say now it's competing within major maintenance for those funds. And we have to prioritize that funds. And as Joe testified to earlier, we're really doing those critical priority one projects in major maintenance. So it's not to say that State House carpet's not important, it is, and that's why we're putting it in its own line item. So it's not competing with the other priority one projects in Joe's program. So this locks it in for David, no one else can touch it.
And also sometimes some of these projects are done in the State House. It's not done just with that 50,000. We've got the Friends of the State House that can do fundraising to help pay for some of the projects. The major construction that has occurred, all the updates, like the carpeting, all this is new carpet, new was put in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. All of that was paid through the capital bill as well as money from Friends of the State House. So it's a real partnership there. So we want to make sure that the Friends of the State House know that they're supported. And having a line item specifically for the interior of the State House gives that support to the Friends of the State House as well. And, it's a museum, but it's also our workplace. So there's a delicate balance there. For that, you have to maintain the historical integrity of the building.
Absolutely.
It's one of the most visited site in Vermont. And we owe that to our visitors to maintain it. It's proper manner. And we're working in the building, so we have a lot of wear and tear on this building. Look at the carpet, you know, a lot of ways, not just us. It's everyone that comes in here to testify, our staff, lobbyists, all
The
the
tourists.
receptions that happen, the sidebars, the display tables. I mean, there's a lot of people that come in through this building in the wintertime, bringing in salt and mud. So we have to maintain it. So this is an attempt to do that.
And David will come in and talk more so about the projects he has slated in the near term for the use of this funding.
Okay, anything else? So we'll just have to decide, again, we're gonna have more in-depth conversation on the cash fund, and I will make a commitment to the committee, we're not gonna do it in the afternoon, and we're not gonna do it on a Friday.
Friday at 5, right?
Tuesday or Wednesday mornings. Okay.
So I'm gonna cover this last one. I actually have another meeting that's starting right now. I'm gonna cover this one and then Joe or Eric can jump in on the last one. But EBSC is near and dear to my heart, and I've been spending a lot of time in this area. So we are requesting $1 million for the installation of additional electric vehicle charging stations. We could talk a little bit about that. So BGS is an early adopter. As I said, we have the energy office, and our goal has been to support the adoption of electrical vehicles over time. We were one of the first groups to ever put in EVSE, which is your electrical vehicle supply equipment. One of the first people to put it in for workplace charging, and we've been doing that good work over time. In addition to that, there's also the overlap with the fleet program, as I indicated at the beginning of the year. We are in charge of the overall state fleet program, and we are working very hard to electrify our vehicles over time. The challenge, however, is right now we really have to have that flexible with a non-plug-in hybrid, and the legislature is moving towards only allowing for plug-in and fully electric vehicles. So there is statute right now that went into effect 2 years ago that requires us to replace 75% of our fleet. It does currently allow for non-plug-in, but given the legislation that was passed last year, I know there's an appetite to require that to be plug-in hybrid vehicles. The challenge there is that if I don't have electrical vehicle charging supply equipment, I can't meet that statutory obligation because many of these groups are leasing these vehicles from our fleet. That lease is typically a 5 to 6 year lease agreement that we hold with that agency or department. And those folks are driving them back and forth from their place of work to do the work that they do and driving from one location to another. So if I don't have charging equipment and the only thing I can buy is plug-in, we're in trouble. Because now I'm buying vehicles that I now don't have the ability to actually keep on the road, and that's not good. So there have been various ways in which we have been installing these charging stations. In the beginning, it was really more focused on fleet. And over time, obviously, we've been putting in more workplace charging. Aiken Avenue is a great example of that. We also put in a large bank over at 136 a year ago, as well. And that's in that particular bank is both for the fleet program, but it's also open to the public as well. So the idea is during the day when the fleet is on the road, people can use those that equipment to charge their vehicles, then they leave at the end of the day and then we can bring in our fleet and plug them back in. So that's really, again, how we're trying to do the best and leverage that money to the best of our ability and make it most effective and efficient. So the challenge we have though is we have no specific appropriations to be able to expand our electrical vehicle charging supply equipment. So with no money, I'm hand-tied as to what I can do in terms of helping with the adoption of electrical vehicles. So that's the challenge. That's why we're asking for the 1 million. I will tell you that last year I was very loud. You know me, I'm very persistent. I went to many committees and testified about the fact that we don't have any money to continue to install this equipment. I also talked about how many of our buildings are sited in downtown locations, both to support the economy, but if we're in a downtown location, also making these available to the public is a win-win. Unfortunately, we were not successful in getting any funding last year, even though there was quite a bit that went to both VTrans and ACCD. We do have a current proposal in with ACCD to leverage some of that funding. We are still pending their decision as to whether or not we will receive any of the money possible. So right now, we have about 24 stations throughout the state of Vermont. Many of those are dual port. So we have 40 ports around the state. And then with this money, we believe that we could put out 34 dual ports, which then equals 68 ports. And so that is what we hope the $1 million will give us. Again, it's a conceptual plan. And the last thing I'll mention in terms of how do we know where we want to put them? Well, we're doing that in a couple of different ways. We're working very closely with our fleet program to say where are the gaps in terms of being able to charge to keep electrifying the fleet. Then we also are looking at the current network. Where do we have gaps in the current network? And then the third piece is that downtown siting location. So again, in a downtown setting, where would it be really desirable to continue to put EVSE, both again for the state's needs, but the public needs as well. So we're being very thoughtful and strategic. We're also working with VTrans and our partners at ACCD to make sure that we're not duplicating our efforts, to make sure, again, we're getting the best bang for our buck in terms of where we're installing this equipment across the state.
So we have 4 questions. Chip, Mary, John, and
Take
Troy.
me off and she answered the
Okay.
question.
Chip, John, and Troy.
So, how many charging stations does $1 million buy us?
So we are estimating it will install 34 stations and they're dual port, which means you actually get 68 ports out of that.
That'll be the increased number.
Correct, that will be, so 68 ports is what we hope. Now, again,
Yep.
lots of changes in the market and things I can't predict in terms of the cost of things. It also matters where your electrical supply is and how far you have to bring it out to the charging station. There's a lot of variables in that. But that, when we have done our analysis, is what we believe that we will be able to install with $1 million.
And more of them will be on Aiken Street here? You'll add to that?
Across the state.
No, it would be across the
It will
state.
be,
So
okay.
Barry, Bennington, Brattleboro, Burlington, Colchester, Middlebury.
Okay.
There are some more slated at the Department of Labor for Montpelier, Newport, Rutland, Springfield, and St. Albans. Again, we're trying to
That's where your state office buildings are.
smatter them all over the state is really the goal.
About Hardwick. What about Hardwick?
They don't, you don't have a state office building.
No, you'll ask for that first.
John and then Troy?
You won't live to see it, Chip, sorry.
Well, let's hope so.
I'm sorry to say it.
John?
Commissioner, from the amount of money and the number of chargers, they must all be level 2.
We're
That was
looking,
my question.
yes, we are looking at level 2. There's also a desire to potentially put in a few level 3s here and there. Again, those are for the people that are moving around the state and they're only gonna be in a location. So a level 2 for most vehicles, and again, it varies based on your battery and vehicle type, you can get a full charge on a level 2 at a 4-hour mark. Again, that's averaging a lot of variables there, but on average, it's 4 hours. Well, what happens if I go from one place to another and I don't have 4 hours to charge my vehicle? So we are looking at potentially sprinkling in a couple of level 3s. It has to be strategic because you need 3-phase power. There's a whole bunch of things, so we would have to look where do we have that readily available. Again, goal is to get the best bang for our buck out of the money that we have.
And the 3s are really expensive.
Yeah.
And the 3s are, so that's why I'm saying it would just be a few, it wouldn't be a lot, but again, being strategic with VTrans and ACCD and understanding the network, we would look to do that, but only where it makes economical financial sense
And
to
what
do
would
so.
that charge be?
Those charges, this is right up his alley, so he probably knows more than I do. Level 3, so if you go to level 3,
20 minutes.
Yeah.
They're best deployed in places where you're underway and running low. As a destination, level 2 is really a more practical application. And I've ground truthed some of the gaps in our charging locations with our fleet vehicles and found myself in some kind of hair raising situations
Like
where I had
last
to
year?
stop at the ag lab and work there for 2 hours out of their kitchen while I limped the leaf along.
You zoomed in from there.
I did zoom in from there, that's right. We're one of the state's largest employers, and this is part of being a big employer, is accommodating your employees.
and
Your
leading by
customers,
example
so-
as well, Eric. Yeah, absolutely.
Troy and then Wayne?
When do you find out about the AECD thing?
We should hopefully find out about that in the next few weeks, hopefully before crossover. It's their process, so I can't make any promises, but I was told it would be soon. Even though, and if we get some funding from ACCD, we could still, we know how to put these out, we know where we need them, so I would still lobby and advocate for this $1 million here in the capital bill as well. Again, we don't have an annual appropriation for these, and we know we want to support the adoption, and this is the only way we're going to get there.
Wayne?
Given today's technology, do you have any assessment of any lost productivity of your employees using them?
Interesting question. I don't.
Just one.
Yeah, Eric.
No. Besides Eric, I did have a project manager.
Oh, you're gonna tell the story.
Who, yes, he
Poor
was,
Kevin.
not the whole story. He took a fleet vehicle from 136 State Street, just hopped in and went to Burlington. Didn't give it any thought. Just about the time he was pulling into Burlington, realized his battery was almost dead. And so he went to his job meeting, then came out, then started headed south back to Montpelier, and then sort of went to a little panic mode on where to charge and everything else. And it was cold and he was trying to freeze up, so I think that was part of it. And, told him where the charging station was when he called it and everything else, but he then found out that with the leaf, while you're charging, you don't get any heat. So Fleet did send out a vehicle to get wait for the one that gets charged, and gave him a car so he could get back to work. So only have one so far, but.
And range anxiety is real, so I have a harder time sometimes with things that are scary to me, and for some reason vehicles can be scary. So I will just tell you, even though I'm the commissioner of BGS, that folks have been trying to get me into a fully electric vehicle, and I am scared. Because I'm scared about how far can I go with that electric vehicle. So again, with that range anxiety, making sure that throughout the state we have accessible charging equipment is essential for people like me who are reluctant to get in one because I'm nervous about being stranded somewhere. Now again, whether that's logical or whether that's just my own anxiety, but again, making sure we have a robust network will be really important. Eric?
I just wanted, because I'm big on analogies, we are at the point in the development of our charging network, kind of like we were 20 years ago with charging your cell phone at the airport. So a lot of the time you'll see people hanging out under drinking fountains, finding an outlet, charging their phone. Now you go into the airport, you put it down on the counter and it charges itself. So these are early days. People are going to get more comfortable. The holes are going to fill. But we have a responsibility as an employer and as you said, leading by example to get things out there.
But we should have at least some assessment of the cost, because that's a cost.
Yep.
All of that kind of stuff is a cost. Presumably, let's hope it all goes away, the ranges get better, we have, everything becomes reliable and it's seamless and it becomes like everyday use. But if it doesn't, if we can't get three-phase everywhere we need it, or the grid doesn't work, what are we gonna do? If we've bought all kinds of vehicles and invested in infrastructure.
John?
I would use the analogy that we're at the point where Henry Ford was in 1910. But one question, I've heard quite a few stories. How reliable have our units been? I've heard stories about people pulling out of the units that are operative, not necessarily state-owned units.
Yeah, that's a great question. So they do need to be maintained.
Like parking garages.
And we have had some stations at the Vale, which is the Vermont Agricultural Environmental Lab. A couple of heads weren't working. We became aware that a couple of the heads were not working in the Waterbury City Office Complex. So we have the ability to actually plug into those systems remotely and see what, not all of them, the level 2s with the charge point technology on them, so it's clear. But we have the ability to go through our system for those and see what's working and what's not working. And when we find something's not working, we work with ChargePoint because that's the company that we're working with to basically install and then maintain them over time. So far in the instances that I've known where the heads are not working properly, ChargePoint has come out and they fixed them and it's been free of charge again to the state because we are under a contract for them to operate and over time. But it does happen, and periodically we have to check and make sure and then work with ChargePoint to get them.
Big disappointment when you pull up to it.
I know, and it's not working.
Chip and then Gina?
So would that happen on an inspection basis? I mean, would they be inspected or would we react to reports of charging stations not working?
So we do it in a couple of different ways. One is certainly if something's not working, we do normally hear about it from our customers that are trying to access those stations. And then we do go in a couple of times a week through our own infrastructure to see whether or not they're responding to us. And then again with WIMS, I'm hoping that can become automatic so we don't have to check. We'll just get a little beep on our screen to say, hey, this charging station's not working correctly. You need to come out and figure out what's wrong with it. That's the future. We're not there yet, but
Okay.
that's where we're going.
Good.
Gina?
I'm all set. That was my question.
So for these that we're putting out there, these are state charging stations,
Correct.
state dollars. But the public can also use it. It's not just for our state-owned fleet vehicles that is under the jurisdiction of BGS to at least, to let agencies and department employees use them. Is there a charging fee for particularly the public more so than just state employees? Is there a charging fee down at the end here when legislators use this and we're entitled to mileage reimbursement?
All wonderful, great questions, and some of them need to be sorted out. I don't have answers for all of them. I will say that Representative Butch Shaw, who used to sit in this committee, created legislation through the Capitol bill a few years ago that said where we have the ability to charge for charging, because we don't with the level ones, or we don't have the charge point on them. So anywhere we can charge for charging, he was passing legislation that we would. It took us a couple of years to get there, because there was concerns about it being a fee. But really so this year, we provided information to the governor's office about what does it take just for the electricity. So all we're basically doing is charging for the electricity piece, and the reason why we're doing that is because if we don't recover those costs, it's going to be for space. And that means that the tenants in our buildings are paying for people utilizing the electrical vehicle charging stations rather than the people that are actually accessing it. So right now it is 26 cents a kilowatt hour. And just to give you a comparison, and again, we started this comparison a couple of years ago, so I don't know what the rate is today. In the private market, you're more around 45 cents or so if it's a privately run station, because we're just trying to recover our costs. We're not trying to make any profit, obviously. Where a private network is, their goal is to try to make some level of profit. Otherwise, why would you have them? So we are only charging what we need to recover the costs of that electricity.
So in a 4-hour cycle,
Eric would know. 'Cause he
how
charges.
much kilowatt hours are we using?
If I drove here fully charged in the morning and plugged in, it would take a little less than 4 hours to get me back, and it would be about 10 kilowatts.
So it'd be 260.
It's not much.
Gina, then
You did
Wayne?
it, Alice.
Wayne?
So do you have any estimated breakdown? How much, what are you getting per mile? What's the cost per mile?
Ooh, that's
That's a
tricky
tough
because
one.
every car is different.
Every car is different.
A F-150 Lightning probably uses a little more juice than a Tesla, which uses a little more juice than a
Mustang.
Yeah, I understand, like, say you average for your fleet.
Oh,
We can get
yeah,
back to
we
you
can
on
get that
that.
from
I don't,
Harmony.
she would know. And she's an ace sometimes.
The fleet's mostly Leafs, I think. There are some plug-in Priuses and C-Maxes that have a little bit of electric
And
range.
they're pretty lightweight, so I would imagine.
But a plug-in hybrid also is it totally battery, or is there also an engine there that feeds the battery? With the plug-in hybrid,
Some do, some don't.
right?
I can do this one if you want. There are a couple of different hybrid systems, like if you know the Chevy Volt
Mm-hmm.
had a gasoline-powered engine that functioned as a generator to charge the batteries that ran an electric motor that was the drivetrain. A Prius has a hybrid system where the gasoline and electric work together, and it's sort of measured in the drivetrain between the two different things. So for the Ford C-Maxes that we have in the fleet, they'll get you 20 or 30 miles on electric, and then the gasoline kicks in. It might kick in if you're looking for extra power on the hill or something sooner than that. Each car is a little different, but
So where I ran up here, they have a Venza that is a hybrid, and they've asked us to start the car periodically. So when I do that, what I see on the screen is I see the engine, I see the battery, I see the wheels. So when the battery is charging, I see the arrow go down to the battery.
right.
So if I was to drive that car, would I see the arrow coming from the battery, or would I see it come coming from the engine? Does it go back and forth?
It would go back and forth depending on how fast you're going.
Okay.
Or what kind of terrain you're going. Like at that, we have a 2010 Prius and I can go at, 20 miles an hour on the flat for a while and it's just running on the batteries. Or if you're on a slight incline. If you start to go uphill, the gasoline kicks in.
How long does does it take for the gasoline engine to fully charge the batteries? Do we
It
know?
depends.
It depends.
It depends.
Yeah,
On the
it
terrain,
varies.
as you're just saying, or?
Yeah, I mean, like I live at the top of a 1.5 to 2 mile hill. And if the battery is showing half, if I'm coasting down the hill, usually by the time I get through those 2 miles, I'm at full battery.
Oh,
But
really?
it's going back and forth.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're not putting strain on
Hybrid, it's a
that.
little
Right.
different.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm gonna have to
You got it.
run, but Eric can jump in on this one all day long. I will just say that in order to meet, well, number one, we lead by example, but also to support the statutory obligation for us to electrify our fleet. I can't do that unless we have enough electrical vehicle charging stations.
So
So
statutorily, you have to replace 75%
yes, I've
of
got
the.
I've got the reference right here. So it was Act 59, Acts of 2019, and it was H529. And it was so it was kind of a tiered process, but the later date that was referenced in the language, on or after July 1, 2019, be hybrid or plug-in for now. Non-plug-in or plug-in for now, but I think it's gonna change. And not less than 75% beginning on July 1st, 2021. So we are obligated, which is great, and we wanna do all this great work, but I can't do it if I don't have charging stations. So just wanna get that on the record in case we don't get the support we need, that I won't be able to meet that statutory obligation.
Great, thank you. You gotta run, we're staying put.
Yes, and they're happy to
We're gonna
jump in
do the
and finish it.
Bennington Monument fence, which we've already heard some things with.
Great job, everybody. We're almost at the end of section 1/2.
Joe's got this one, I'm sure.
It's been a pleasure. I know you'll see me a lot more, but I also hope you have a great Friday. And I'm looking forward to having my beverage. I'm staying.
Steady dangerous, you go first.
Yes.
Okay, Bennington Battle Monument, the fencing. We heard about some of this when we had Laura Trishman in with our maintenance, with our historic preservation. So this is for fencing, $500,000, bonded dollars. It's all yours, Joe.
Laura trumps me in this afternoon, but it's in our section.
Good, yeah.
So in depth, so I'm sure she told you the height of this obelisk. It's 306 feet, and it's the second largest in the US, only against the Washington Monument, which is the largest in the world. So it's been there for quite a number of years. And we started this, several years ago, looking at the maintenance, major maintenance really of this obelisk. But looking at the stones, the stairway, the elevator, and what to do sort of with all three. With the stones, there is some degradation going on with them, some cracking, some spalling. There's a moisture issue because of the thickness of this building. So I'll list that the inside isn't necessarily always dry out, or does not dry out. And so in the winter, even the spring and the fall, you can have some of this freezing action going on the inside because it stays a little cooler throughout. And just because of the thickness of those walls, there's an issue with that, adjusting the physics that are involved with that. Warm on one side of the rock, frozen on the other. And so they had a team. They put out an RFP for a bunch of engineers, knowledge in this field of monuments and stone construction, to look at this and see really what we should be doing to maintain this building. They also looked at the elevator, because the elevator, the original elevator was upgraded, I forget how many years ago, but it used to have a hand crank. So if it got stuck, it tended to actually crank you down. We upgraded the elevator, and what happened with that, even with the battery backup, is the elevator, depends on where the elevator got stuck. If you're a little bit more than halfway, it took you to the top. So when it failed and or the power went out, ending up at the top, A lot of people that then have to walk down the stairs, it's not good. So they're looking at that, they're looking at the stairs. The stairs are original, and they're just, because of the amount of moisture on the inside, it's starting to rust and become a potential problem in the future. So with all that, they had people on the outside, they hung a rope at the top of it and scaled their way down, taking notes, taking pictures, had a drone flying around it, taking all these beautiful pictures of it. And so what they're looking to do is they need more testing. They are testing right now in the winter. They also want to do more investigation, but to really do some of this, they have to put in scaffolding, both on the outside and the inside. That's, I don't know if anybody had seen the pictures after the earthquake in DC when they had scaffolding around the Washington Monument, similar to that. And so this is sort of the beginning of it, of putting a fence around the monument to start the process of the future maintenance of this building. And that, you know, to protect the scaffolding and keeping the people out who may want to climb the scaffolding and the likes of that. So this is the beginning of that whole process. Once that scaffolding goes up, there'll be more testing, more investigating, and to see exactly what has to be done to fix this building in the areas that it needs.
So is the $500,000 going to do the full amount of fencing that you're gonna need there?
I believe so, yes.
And how long do you think the fencing would be up? It's gonna be up for longer
It'll be
than
up the
just,
whole time until we take the scaffolding down. So it'll be years.
it'll be years, because the work will also be including outside work that you're gonna need that scaffolding. So it could be up for as long as 5 years.
Very much so, yes. It all depends on their funding to get through, make the repairs to this facility.
Chip?
Well, will the monument be accessible to the public with the scaffolding up and the fence up?
No, I don't believe so. Yes.
No one will be going into it.
But I'm not 100% sure of that because I have been involved with it on how that scaffolding would work because it's the center core, you have your elevator.
Yeah.
Your stairs wraps around it. So I'm not sure if they take the stairs out and build the scaffolding or build the scaffolding in and around the stair tower.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the historic sites, major maintenance, and it's just $500,000 plus around $500,000 each year. I didn't write down how much. Don't know if anyone heard what Laura said would be the projected cost for the monument for the repairs. They had 12 large projects. I know she spoke about the monument at length.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, she
got-
did. It's on this sheet. It's on that sheet. Thank you. Is that what you were gonna say?
you have a better answer than I do. It's on that sheet.
I changed the page when I found the sheet. So the monument itself, you're talking probably about 400,000 for the work in the monument.
I got the impression that until
They've
the,
already done some work from
Until
what
they
these
haven't-
sheets.
Yeah.
I read the report when it came out and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I want to say the staging alone, I believe was close to $2 million.
Yeah, because that was only in FY '22 and FY '23.
I had the impression that that the assessment process is still going on to the extent that they're not projecting construction costs. Is that?
I believe the consultant threw out a number,
Yeah, it's in here,
over 10, under 20,
right?
I believe, but I'd have to go look that up. Or Laura can give you the actual price.
Yeah, there's about 400,000. Just, well, there's some of this is this is interesting. Temporary covered walkway and safety perimeter fence for entire '23 season. Or until scaffolding is set up for protection. So that's different than what,
Well,
is that a
the
different
fence is the
fence?
beginning of that, and to go into the facility, it would be a covered walkway. So scaffolding on the outside would not prohibit visitors from going in and going up. Once the scaffolding goes on the inside, they would be.
So that's a different answer to
Yes.
your question.
Yeah.
Because you've got the scaffolding on the outside. You're gonna put the fence around beyond that before the scaffolding really goes up,
That is correct.
correct? So when the fencing gets put up and no scaffolding yet on the outside, the monument's open, can be open. When the scaffolding goes up on the
On the
outside,
outside.
the monument is still open.
That I'm not sure, that really is Laura Trishman's area.
But definitely when the scaffolding is put on the inside, the monument will not be
Closed.
open. Okay, so this is the sheet.
I believe they
If it comes on the outside, that's doable. Inside,
And there's another 400,000 that she has listed on the back page.
Yeah.
It's not contracted yet, but the RFP is in process.
No,
Okay, we're gonna have to look at those two appropriations, to make sure that we keep them in sync. I think that's gonna be really important, that we don't shortchange one at the expense of the other.
and I would like her room for that.
Yeah, that's all. John?
Is the fencing
No,
No, it's only to protect everybody from the scaffolding.
that's everything that's done.
Scaffolding from everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll come down.
vandalism to the outside?
I can never.
If that's not stop it either.
No, stop. I suggested some things.
Tristan and then Chip.
I don't know if you said this already, but if you did, I missed it. Is it sort of chain link fence, kind of basic thing, or is there something more?
That's, yes, I do not know the height yet.
Razor
I
wire.
wasn't involved in this beginning, but it very well could be, you know.
No, you've already done it. Corrections.
To keep the honest people out.
Keep the workers in and keep the
He
public.
wants the scaffolding to go, I would, you know, in my younger days, climb the fence, climb the fence.
Easy Joe.
Oh, come on, Joe. Careful here.
Didn't we see him doing that just recently?
$5 Chip?
That was my question.
Joe, you have a schedule.
Okay, folks, so we're done for right now. We're gonna take a,
Should
Let's
I
come-
tell Teresa Wood that she
1
should
o'clock.
come in at 1:45? I mean, 12:45?
You wanna take a half-hour lunch, folks, or 45 minutes?
45.
About one. Well.
Okay, come back at 1.
All
Are
right,
people
and
okay
then
coming
that'll
back at 1?
get Sarah.
And bump Sarah for 15 minutes or, BGS might wanna be here at 1 o'clock. Stanley Wasson?
They're not looking.
I forget, are we in the Senate up on? No.
It is H82. It is the sale of Stanley and Wasson to the city, town of Waterbury.
If you'd like us here, we'll be here.
I think somebody from BGS should be here because I think it's gonna bring some questions up.
It's a nice sunny day to come back.
Yeah, but it's a little cold, so you can eat in the cafeteria.
Yeah, I'm not gonna cross the street until I'm making my final sprint.
Me either.
I don't blame you.
I walked
And it would
down
be-
at the end of Baldwin Street this morning. It was,
So we can go